welcome to Pluribus Fireside Chats. Not as good as FDR's, but hey, it's something. So, how's that for a title, huh? Well, the title will become a bit more apparent when we actually start going into stuff. So let's not waste any time and get right into the news. First, we're going to be talking a bit about Cuba, because Cuba's been a bit in the news recently. You see, Cuba has been having a lot of protests. You know, these things have been happening a lot in Latin America in recent times because people have been effectively dissatisfied with a lot of the things that the government is doing. And, you know, people are now realizing they can just go out in the streets and march. And they're actually doing it. Now, what is happening in these protests? Well, you see, the protests are triggered by a shortage of food and medicine in Cuba. Even in a socialized medicine, situation, medicine isn't there. There is a limit to a degree where it can go and stuff. And we've been seeing a lot of discourse around all this. Who is responsible? What is responsible? Should we blame the U.S.? Blame, the CIA? Should we blame Cuba? Should we blame this, or this? And the answer is very simple. Essentially everyone's to blame. As much of a cop-out as it is, everybody is at fault here. And that situation, that answer, does not actually suit anybody. For example, here's the thing. We have had an embargo on Cuba for a while now. Ever since the Cold War. And basically, the sanctions and embargo that we have on Cuba is what a lot of people on the left are trying to blame on. They're like, oh, that's the reason why. Except, that is true. Yes, we do have sanctions, but is that necessarily 100% to blame? I mean, Cuba, a lot of people on the left tout Cuba as oh, Cuba is good at developing vaccines. Cuba's good at developing all this stuff. So why is there a shortage in Cuba when literally a couple weeks ago I covered a story where it's Cuba developed a vaccine that is very heavy in regards to it's very effective at combating COVID-19. So how's there vaccine shortage when Cuba makes it? Well, it's because a lot of Cubans mostly take out of state vaccines as opposed to the vaccines that are imposed by the Cuban government. And let's be real. This is just something you gotta be completely honest about. Not everyone agrees with the Cuban government all the time. That's just the objective truth of the matter. Sometimes people in Cuba will not agree with things that the Cuban government does, much in the same way an American doesn't necessarily agree with everything the American government does. And that's one problem that many people don't understand about this Cuban protests. Much in the same way the Hong Kong protests. They're saying that this is entirely being pushed or basically being instigated by the CIA or any other intelligence agency to try and push against Cuba. Make Cuba less of a state. Try and delegitimize them. However, do you have any evidence to back that up? I mean, I haven't, I've seen people say this, but I haven't seen people actually bring up evidence to back it up. And especially considering the same people will say that for every single protest in Venezuela, every single protest in Nicaragua, especially Nicaragua, because it's that is objectively not true, but keep going on, because, you have to keep your talking points. Your talking points is that these Latin American socialist governments can never, ever, 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 ever be bad, and that all of their failures can be blamed on the United States, when in fact it's well, not really. And it's one of the things that Cuba actually took stand. One of the things that Cuba originally was seen as a heralding of. They could legitimately look at themselves in the mirror and be yep, we screwed up. Even in the current protests, the current president, who hasn't been doing things good in handling the protests because he's been pushing the military to crack down on protests, but it's okay when the Cuban government does it because it's combating the CIA. It's okay when the people we like do the bad thing. He legitimately was okay, yeah, there's some aspects where we did screw up, but Like, the sanctions are of the biggest situation problem right now. And that you could say that. You could legitimately say that. Like, I'll say it. Yes, the Cuban government has more than likely done things that might have contributed to the vaccine shortage. However, the fact that there is an embargo is a problem, and maybe lifting it will at the very least mitigate the current crisis in Cuba. You see, believe it or not, the U.S. can do that too. Like, the thing about the U.S. is, like, everybody thinks that the U.S. is, like, the puppet master all the time, but they don't have to be the puppet master all the time. They can sometimes just sit back and watch the thing unfold, and that's what they're doing in this situation. They have the embargo, they could lift the embargo and lift the sanctions, but they don't want to, because them not doing anything is effectively doing worse than if they actually did something. I'm of course for lifting the sanctions, and I'm of course against the US like trying to invade Cuba. That's a big thing people don't realize. Like, the second you criticize Cuba, it's all like, oh, you're US imperialist, because that's the only argument people have. You're a CIA op, you're a psyop, blah blah blah. You know, you're afraid. You know, you can literally just say you don't agree with the person. That's a thing that people do. Like, people can be dumb and you cannot like their political views. And it's even got to the point where people are legitimately, like, mad at people in the United States praising the protesters. Like, AOC posted a tweet where she said, "We see Cubans rise up and protest for their rights like never before. We stand in solidarity with them and condemn the undemocratic actions led by President Diaz-Canel." You know, the undemocratic actions, of course, being the police going and being sicked on the protesters. That's probably very undemocratic in my eyes. But socialists will be like, oh, you're being imperialist. And it's incredibly funny. The socialists are the ones who keep claiming, like, oh, you gotta stand with this. When in fact, Castro himself would be aligned with what AOC says. Castro himself claimed that the his model for democracy in Cuba, like the reason why he made it so like, oh, it's a one-party state, but we're still a democracy. I'm president for life, but it's still a democracy. The reason why he said it was a democracy was because his whole model was like, Cubans, if you don't like what I'm doing, come to my house and protest in front of my house. And then maybe I'll be like, they don't really like this law I'm doing. Maybe I should repeal it. That is what he did. Like, that's the point. That was what he's advocated for. But it's like, you still gotta get mad at AOC for being AOC. How dare AOC say that she supports protesters? I thought that's one thing you favor of. But anyways, let's move on to the next story. This one's gonna be relatively short because it's from a congressman I don't really care about, but it's something that I think is very interesting. Representative Payne Jr. introduces Payment Choice Act to protect cash. You see, this was a bill that I thought was very interesting because this is something that I see a lot of people talk about. It's a thing that many people, like, think about, but it's something that's like, yeah, but did you consider this? Basically, here's what happened. As we may know, the U.S. is basically, like, worldwide economics is basically trying to instill, like, that, like, a debit card is the way to go. Like, a lot of people don't carry cash. A lot of people that you might know will carry a debit card. A lot of people will, like, either, like I said, a lot of people basically don't carry cash. Or at least a lot of people that you might know don't carry cash. How do you pay your, like, YouTubers now? You have to give them money via Patreon, a completely electronic way. Some people go to Bitcoin, completely electronic way to do cash. PayPal, Cash App. The most people do nowadays is, like, the check that your boss gives you at work that you then usually just take a picture of on your phone and then deposit it in the bank. Some people are actually in favor of this kind of model because they think that less paper would be less trees cut down and, things would be all hunky-dory. However, Donald Payne Jr. basically states, okay, but what about people who can't afford to do any of this? What about the people who need to carry cash? And then you start to think, oh yeah. What about the lower income individuals who will more than likely not have a debit card, and depending on how low they are on the socioeconomic ladder, might not even have a bank account, and certainly no Dogecoin. Now you might say, well, what's the problem? Like, there are places that accept cash. Well, yeah, but there are a lot of places that are outright saying that they will refuse cash. Originally, the big thing was like everybody would go like, oh, cash only. You would only pay in cash because cash was the thing that people would use. But now there are a lot of people who are literally going like, I can't accept cash. I only accept the electronic payments. But the people who can't get that, because think about it. You have to do a lot of things. You have to go to the bank. You have to, like, open an account. Like literally, it's not a simple process. You don't just click a button and go, account ready. You have to supply all your documents. You have to supply, like, a lot of things. And the same thing with, like, a voter ID or any other, like, identification. It will take a day to do, at least. I might say, well, I mean, it's not going to take that long. Well, yeah, but how long? Like, I know it didn't take, like, when I got my bank account, it didn't take me that long. I was in and out pretty fast. But a lot of people don't have that luxury. I had the luxury to do that. A lot of people don't. I had the luxury to go get a voter ID because I had a free day. A lot of people don't have that luxury. A lot of people have to work for every day of the week. And then Sunday, the banks are usually either closed or, like, they don't want to work. They don't want to go anywhere that day because that's, like, their day of worship or any other sort of thing. So I do commend the bill for what it's going to do because I think, like, at the very least, we need to make it easier to get bank accounts. Now, that's going to be tricky because it's, like, easier to get bank accounts. What does that mean? We have to, at the very least, incentivize card payments before we move forward with any sort of, like, big change in our money. Okay, next story is DACA. A federal judge has blocked the new DACA applications and says that the program is illegal. A federal judge in Texas on Friday ruled that the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, the Obama-era program shielding certain undocumented immigrants from deportation, is illegal and blocked new applicants. The ruling from Judge Andrew Hanen would bar future applications. It does not immediately cancel current permits for hundreds of thousands of people, though it once again leaves them in a devastating legal limbo and is a reminder of the uncertainty they face. This is definitely a thing that won't bode well for Biden, because think about it. Like, Biden, one of the big things that Biden was trying to do was like, oh, I'm gonna be different. Like, I'm different. I'm not Trump. I'm the anti-Trump. And the kids in cages thing, that blew up in his face a little bit. This is not gonna bode well for him either, if he doesn't, like, do any major action on this. But there's not much we can do now. We have to wait and see how things play out. Okay, the next story is coming from the Progressive Caucus. You see, the Progressive Caucus is trying to negotiate what to do in regards to the series of 6 bills that are going to be antitrust bills. One member by the name of Zoe Lofgren, basically, her district represents Silicon Valley, like a large part of Silicon Valley, and basically she was arguing that these antitrust bills would be very detrimental because big tech gives her a lot of money. Now, the reason why she tried to use this as an example is like that she doesn't need to raise any of that money for herself. She instead gives that money to the Progressive Caucus and tries to help them get more seats. And she even went so far as to imply that they didn't understand this. Like, she was saying like the fact that you're bringing this bill up is literally just like you're like wasting our time. And Pramila Jayapal was like, whoa, hold on. I'm from Seattle, the home of Amazon. I know what I'm doing. I know what this would do for money for certain members of this caucus, but I don't care because I don't take that money. And then David Sisselin literally lost it. And it was like, He literally, like, he was quoted as saying, "You may disagree with the bills, you may have other interests you're trying to protect, but to suggest the members of this subcommittee, of the Judiciary Committee, don't understand them, with all due respect, is deeply offensive." Like, he was literally just like, look, you may be the bitch of corporations, but don't pretend that you have, like, a big, like, moral objection to this. And it's like, alright, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool, Sicilian. I don't know much about you on a lot of other things, but that's alright. And basically it means that Lofgren, sounds like you're time to start thinking of primarying you, and Sicilian will move you into the don't necessarily need to primary right now. Okay, so on a similar level to progressive legislation, let's talk about the Green New Deal for public schools. Jamal Bowman has revealed something called the Green New Deal for public schools. It would put $446 billion towards retrofitting the nation's public school buildings, and it would create an Office of Sustainable Schools within the Department of Education. It would distribute grants to make buildings energy efficient and carbon neutral, and add features such as charging stations for electric vehicles. Like he said, that's what he said. Like, this is what this legislation would do. And it is with this bill that I finally 100% get the Green New Deal. Like, one of the major criticisms that many people have given to the Green New Deal of AOC was that it was very broad, but also very empty. Like, the Green Party Green New Deal was like, But the AOC Green New Deal was more of like a philosophical outline for like something that she wanted to build. But it's with this thing, like with the Green New Deal for public schools, that I find like I get it now. The Green New Deal in total is a blueprint, and there would be separate bills that would basically fill in the gaps. Like, we have the Green New Deal for public housing, the Green New Deal for Cities Act, we have the Green New Deal for public schools. So you see, there's a lot of like specifics for specific areas of the Green New Deal. I assume there'd be like, oh, the Green New Deal for healthcare, or the Green New Deal for jobs, like something along those lines. And basically all these, the Green New Deals would basically all fit under the big umbrella of just the Green New Deal. And yeah, this is a good way to try and push legislation. You know, you have the basic framework for the entire thing, and then you get specifics down the line. Not down the line, but this is like, you got the first Green New Deal was like to bring the Green New Deal to people's attention, like to push the idea of a Green New Deal. And now for this next session, we're getting like this is how we're going to accomplish X, this is how we're going to accomplish Y, this is how we're going to accomplish Z. And yeah, that's a very good way to try and handle this bill. Okay, so the last story we're going to be talking about is, of course, the $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill. Now, the whole idea was like Bernie wanted to raise this number higher. Like he was like lower than 6 million is a little too low. But it seems like what it's not getting in money, it's making up for in what it's going to do and how they're going to do it. Because this is one thing that they were saying point blank is like, yeah, we're doing this via reconciliation. Republicans can vote for it if they want, but we're not going to do this with you. Like, the concessions that Bernie got was like, it's going to include aspects of the PRO Act that wouldn't have passed with reconciliation. So that's going to be weaseled in here. You're going to have, like, you're going to address climate change. You're going to prevent small businesses from having their taxes raised. And the biggest one is that he is going to expand Medicare to people who are 60, and it will cover dental, vision, and hearing. That's the big thing that people have been, like, clamoring for. Like that's the thing that the moderates were supposedly in favor of. And it's like, okay, now you're in power. Go do that. And yet somehow there are some lefties, quote unquote, that are still complaining about it. And that leads directly into the main topic of this video. Like, as you may have read from the title, the very spicy title, we're going to be talking about something very interesting. Well, I mean, we always talk about something very interesting on this channel, but this one might be more interesting than you think. Because this thing has been eating people up for a long time, and even the people who participate in this somehow complain about it as well. Basically, everybody on the internet who's on the left has been clamoring for the idea of a so-called united left. There was even a group and a hashtag literally called United Left, with the idea of uniting lefties from all across their specific ideas to become a big multi-tendency organization that could actually do something. But if you know anything about the American left, that's not how things work. We are all too purist for our own sake, and we'll all fight like heck to get our ideas through, no matter how much we fail, and as such, we'll remain divided. Literally, divisions within left-wing groups can literally stem from, I adhere to this person, I don't like this person, and that's it. However, despite this, there have been some left-wing groups that have actually had some success in the United States. I mean, the former Labor Party in Minnesota got a decent number of people elected to office. The Socialist Party got a decent number of people elected to office as well. They elected 2 members of Congress. They got at least 3 major city mayors in Milwaukee alone. And in Wisconsin, they became a very prevalent member of the Wisconsin political ideology. The Bolus Party got 2nd place in the first election they participated in and became a decent part of the political sphere in that area. The American Labor Party became a decent part of New York politics for a while. Left-wing groups have on and off taken over the Democratic Party a couple of times. FDR, the Populists with William Jennings Bryan. The Bernie wing has had a mixed record. Justice Democrats is seen as like a very big resurgence to the left, and DSA and such. Now, aside from the fact that all these groups are left-wing and have had various degrees of decent success, wonder what else they had in common? Groups that are left-wing oppose them. And that's one thing people don't realize. Like people will call like people like Socialist MMA grifter, or Eric London, or any of these other people who or any member of like a minority party or anything of the sort. Basically they'll call everybody like, oh yeah, they're like a fraud, they're a grifter. But it's like, are they really though? Many people don't realize this. There's a reason why you see all these people with like hammers and sickles on their Twitter, and then they'll go and like retweet Gray Zone, and they'll say like Nico House is so great and Jimmy Dore. There's a reason why that's the case. You may be like, wait, these groups wouldn't necessarily agree with those people. Why do they retweet them? Why do they like support these like obvious grift organizations? Very simple. Like, this is one thing that people figure. Like, I figured this out because you just see it. There's a reason why people like PSL, people like SEP, people like SWP, people like the Green Party, people like Movement for People's Party, people who are like affiliated with the Communist Party. There's a reason why a lot of these groups will attack people like DSA or Justice Democrats. And it really is simple. They're jealous. Like, they may claim like, oh, we have ideological disagreements and stuff. But if you actually think about it, notice how it's always the smaller groups going after the larger groups, not the larger groups going after the smaller groups. DSA doesn't talk about the SCP. They don't care. They don't care about the SCP because the SCP is irrelevant. But the smaller groups always go after the bigger groups. Because this is, like, historically, this has just always been the case. The smaller groups are so convinced that their ideology is right that the idea that another group is being successful while their ideology is not successful, instead of rethinking their ideology and trying to translate it into what actually is the case, they will blame the people who are larger. And if you legitimately look at the history of the left-wing movements in the United States, it has never been the ones that have been like die hard, like, oh, we read Lenin, Mao, and Trotsky and all these people. Like, it's never been those groups that have been successful. It has always been the groups that meet people where they sit. You see this all the time on Twitter. People will claim like, oh, the working class doesn't necessarily think that AOC is that far left. That's not true at all. The working class in America is 100% further to the right than AOC. Objectively, the working class in America thinks AOC is a socialist, like, communist spy of Soviet Russia. That's what they think. The working class does not have the same, like, viewpoints on philosophy and stuff that you do. And this isn't just directed at one particular person. This is for everybody. Like, people like Eric London. Like, I mean, you see, I call out certain people by name, and I don't call certain people out by name, because there's certain people who I want a better relationship with, and not Eric London. I don't care about Eric London. Like, Eric London, he can be happy, he can be fine, he can be whatever. But it's like, yeah, I've already burned that bridge. Who cares? People like Eric London who are like, the working class revolution is like a step away, or people who are like, I'm going to build a socialist commune with all my working class buddies, and they're going to join me. None of that is true. None of that is going to happen, because it has never happened in the past. Now you might say, what do you mean? It happened in Russia, it happened in Cuba, it happened in Venezuela, it happened in... Yeah, it happened there. But it didn't happen in the United States. Because the United States, they don't care about that. People in the United States do not care about the worldwide socialist revolution. They don't care about building a socialist commune in Nevada. They don't care about those things. That's a thing that lefties have actually tried to debate on. Like, why don't they care? Why are all these other areas so ripe for revolution, but this area is not ripe for revolution? And there are a lot of factors for that. One thing is that we, like, Americans see themselves as like capitalism is so ingrained in the United States political system that the idea of anything else is just ludicrous to them. One of the other things that have been proposed is, like, the U.S. never experienced feudalism. Like, feudalism, literally, like, I don't know if I can explain it properly, really, but I'll try anyways. Feudalism was basically what the world's economy was before capitalism. And the idea was that people who were like monarchs or any other type of lord or ruler would basically conquer an area and then say, tell you what, you're some poor random peasant who can't read. Tell you what, I have this large field, good for planting crops, but I don't want to plant crops on my own. That's dumb. Tell you what, you can have that little area over there, and in return, you can turn, like, the rest of these acres into good crop material. That sounds cool. I get a place to live? And I got an employment? Yeah, cool. Isn't that cool? Cool. Do I get money, too? Why would you get money? You're living on my land for free. Oh, and also in exchange, if anybody tries to conquer my land, you're on the front lines. I don't think I like that. Sorry, buddy. If you don't like that, you can try and fend for yourself. Or you can stay here. But you see, by the time that feudalism had gone and passed, capitalism had entered the scene, and then that's when America was founded. America never got to experience feudalism, whereas Europeans, and I guess to a degree Latin Americans, because I'm trying to think, did Latin America, I guess technically, I mean, they experienced slavery, which is basically feudalism, but worse. They didn't even get a plot of land to live on. They lived in, like, a house that was with, like, 50 other people. At least in feudalism, they got their own little shack to call their own home. Maybe that's because the Europeans were white. I I guess that's why. But basically, Engels was the one who made that hypothesis. Like, since the U.S. didn't experience feudalism, they really had no basis on, like, what would potentially be, like, the end goal of capitalism. Because to some people, like, feudalism is basically, like, final stage of capitalism. So, yeah, that's why, like, a big revolutionary socialist or, like, stuff hasn't really happened. But, and that even seeps into, like, the electoral sphere. Because if you're openly running on, like, an idea similar to revolution, then you might not necessarily be welcomed in a capitalist society. And that's where more reformist branches of socialism came to be. You see, by that time, like, socialism was literally like revolution or nothing. But they had started, like, making other forms of socialism. Like I said, reformism, which is basically democratic socialism and social democracy. Forms of socialism that basically say, okay, this revolution, the socialist revolution to get this immediate transition to socialism, that's not going to happen. That's objectively not going to happen. What we can instead try is work within the bourgeois system to instead try and spread our message that way. And hopefully with that, we can try and basically make the world socialist. And they even tried doing that after revolutionary times, because when you do a revolution, there are some people who might want to do a revolution again to try and get rid of the previous revolution. So socialism basically went back to being sort of reformist to a degree in Europe as well, and even Latin American countries, but that's a whole story for a different day, maybe. But you see, that's the thing. It was pretty abundantly clear in America that reformism was the only way to go. A socialist revolution wasn't going to happen. Reformism was it. Because, you know, back at the time when leftism started picking up in the United States, you know, it's just, there wasn't that much in there for a socialist revolution, so reformism was the way to go. And the ways they reformized was different. You see, some people tried to translate the revolutionary actions into electoral politics, like the Socialist Labor Party. They were literally like, okay, we can't do revolution, new plan. Let's translate revolution into the ballot box. But then there were other people that literally were like, okay, let's adopt the full-on reformist method, which is where the Social Democratic Party / the Socialist Party came along, and they got various degrees of success. And that's when the attacks began, because the Socialist Labor Party thought that they had been doing what the Socialist Party was doing, and they thought, like, oh, logically, this is what they meant by reformism, right? Like, trying to translate it via, like, a ballot box. This is the right way to do it. But anything more than that was seen as betraying their personal beliefs. And that's why they started seeing Debs as a traitor to socialism. They thought the fact that he was changing, like, he was adapting his platform to better fit with the United States and their political system that they had, rather than campaigning on literally, like, let's get rid of the entire political system, that didn't bode well. Like, I mean, the Socialist Labor Party, they were literally running on, if we are elected, the presidency, the Senate will be gone. And, like, no, that's not going to win people over, unfortunately. Like, logistically, that is not what is going to win people over. And the Socialist Party knew this. They knew you can't run on this. This is political suicide. So, in order to actually move our ideas into a way that we can actually benefit society, we have to meet people where they stand. Rather than running on the socialist revolution, they ran on, let's make healthcare free for everybody in the United States. I don't see why it has to be a for-profit industry. They ran on, oh, I don't see why somebody who wakes up at the crack of dawn and then works until it's time to go to bed, I don't see why that person has to, like, work for little pennies. Maybe he should get dimes or even $1. They ran on, oh, there are people who are being segregated into different communities. I don't see any reason why they should be doing this. I think it's racist. That's what they ran on. They ran on the issues that people cared about, that they could legitimately meet the people where they stood, and that is why those groups started seeing success. And it was the failure of the socialist groups that could not adapt their viewpoints into this. That is why they failed. And I know this for a fact, again, because there's also an example of a group trying out changing from doing the whole, like, let's do socialist revolution, forget everything else, into the let's make a world, like meet people where they sit. And that was the Communist Party of the United States. They were originally much in that SLP crowd. Like, oh, we're running on basically the communist revolution is coming. Be ready. But then they were like that was the whole point. Like, especially during the Great Depression, that was literally what they were trying to do. Basically trying to be like, okay, the communist revolution is here. Come on, boys. We're in a Great Depression. If the revolution doesn't happen now, it's never going to happen. But people did not care about the revolution. Nobody cared, because that would imply that you are willing to go die for the slight chance that maybe you might win, even though it is pretty clear you're not going to win. And then the Communist Party was basically like, okay, that plan's not going to work. Tell you what, let's try and organize through unions, help people organize through their union troubles, get their jobs back, help African Americans get on their feet, even though they're being discriminated against. And that worked. The Communist Party got very popular to the point where in the next, when the next decade was approaching, they started making them into a legitimate threat. That was when the Red Scare happened, when the Communist Party was picking up momentum, because they had translated their ideology into becoming more in line with what America would do. Meeting people where they stood, and not, oh, let's drag you to this. That's not how it's going to work. You're going to have to, the only way it's going to work is if you drag them slightly to you, but you have to meet the demands of them. And that's why these reformist groups always win over the revolutionary groups. Because the revolutionary groups, they cannot do that. The SAP does not fathom the idea of maybe people in Amazon want to form a union. The idea of Amazon forming a union doesn't make sense to them. They want to have a worker co-op. No union, worker co-op thing only. And if they do not propose worker co-op thing only, we will fight against the union. And that is why they attack their own. They point the gun at the person who is their ally and not the person who is their enemy. Because this is another thing. Due to the fact that they shift themselves off into this specific small area that is 100% only to them, like the SCP doesn't care about any other socialist group. They only care about what the SCP members stand for, much like a lot of other socialist groups. They only care about their little bubble. They've branched themselves off into their own small, unique clique, like the PSL people as well. They've pushed themselves far off from where the American populace actually stand, that they've accepted the fact they're never going to get what they want. They're not going to get the worker co-op thingy that they want. They're not going to get the, massive Castroist United States. They're not going to get a United States that has a mural of Castro and, North Korea. They're not going to get that. So they've accepted they're going to lose. They accept this. And since they know they're not going to win, why make it so that any other lefty can win? Because for them, it's better if everybody loses than if they lose only. Because if they lose only, that means they're stupid and their ideology means nothing. But if all the left is losing, they could be like, see, your plan isn't working either. But if we were in your position, we'd be able to do all this big stuff. And yet, conveniently, you never get to the point where you can be in that position. Are they grifters? Not necessarily. They legitimately believe everything they stand for, and they might not be getting any money for it. But they will actively push against any of the people who actually want to fight for it Fight for the things that they care about. And that's what we're seeing with like DSA and like all these other groups. People will rally against DSA 100% because they legitimately, like, if DSA loses, then you can't claim that going the DSA route would work. But in fact, if you just look statistically, like literally, it's working right now. As of right now, DSA is winning. Of all the socialist groups in the world, DSA is winning. DSA is the one that has like 6 members of Congress. How many members of Congress are green? None. How many members are PSL? None. How many are Workers' World Party? None. Socialist Workers' Party? None. Socialist Equality Party? None. And how many votes did all those parties get? Like 3. Like, people are legitimately gonna sit there and be like, DSA is failing. They have 6 prominent members of Congress that are literally some of the most well-known politicians currently existing in the United States. DSA was able to rally to get a Democratic Socialist to be this close to winning the Democratic nomination twice. A Democratic Socialist is the winning candidate in the most flippable seat in the 2022 election cycle. And you're going to sit here and tell me that they're failing, but if we go the PSL route, that will actually make it. It's literally just doomerism for the sake of you being self-centered and unable to adapt to the political situation at hand. All these people with the hammer and sickle in their, like, Twitter all the people who are like, I'm PSL, all the people who think that running against AOC is somehow good for the long run in any sphere, like, all those people, they legitimately don't have any interest in winning. People like Proud Socialists have no interest in winning because they don't have the ability to win. And they know this, they've accepted this, but they want to make sure that you don't win. They want to make sure that they can at the very least say, well, at least they're not doing anything either. Rather than trying to build a bridge with any of these groups, they instead want to feel superior about themselves and instead try to, like, one-up each other. That's all I have to say on that topic, and hopefully that rambling answered your question on why the left keeps killing itself. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that bell to be notified when a future video mine comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, you can go to my website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, check out my articles in the Independent Political Report, or consider supporting me on Patreon.